Baby, if you ever see this video, know that I love you. I never wanted things to turn out this way.
Pay attention to this security camera footage. June 18th, 8:41 a.m. A fixed CCTV camera records the prison laundry from a high corner near the ceiling. Industrial dryers line the back wall. An inmate in an orange jumpsuit enters from the right, pushing a metal cart stacked with linen bags. He moves steadily across the frame, parks the cart near the dryers, releases the handle, and walks out of view to the left. 90 seconds later, he returns alone and stops in the open floor space, standing still and facing the machines. He waits. After 2 minutes, a uniformed correctional officer approaches from the right aisle, stops at arm's length, and speaks briefly while pointing a finger toward the inmate's chest. The inmate does not respond. The officer turns and walks back the way he came. 2 minutes pass. A second correctional officer enters from behind the inmate, closing the distance until they are nearly touching. The inmate remains stationary. The officer leans in, their heads meet. They kiss. No other movement is visible. After several seconds, the officer steps away and exits the frame in the same direction he entered. The inmate stays where he is, alone, facing the dryers. This is the last confirmed video record of him before his housing assignment changed later that day. This was not a random interaction, and it did not begin in that room. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Marcus Ellison was 32 years old when he entered state custody. He had grown up in the south end of Dayton, Ohio, finished high school late, and spent most of his 20s working hourly jobs that paid on time but never enough to accumulate savings. At the time of sentencing, he was employed as a delivery driver for a regional appliance retailer, a position that required a clean driving record and long shifts but offered health insurance. He lived with his wife, Alana Ellison, 29, a medical billing clerk at a private clinic, and their 6-year-old son, Jordan. Neighbors described Marcus as quiet and routine-driven. He picked Jordan up from school every day at the same time, cooked on Sundays, and avoided arguments. His prior record consisted of 2 misdemeanor citations from his early 20s, both resolved without jail time. Marcus was incarcerated following a conviction for nonviolent felony burglary. In October 2019, he entered a closed construction site after hours and removed copper wiring and power tools valued at approximately $8,400. The theft was not impulsive. Surveillance footage showed Marcus returning twice over a 3-day period using the same unlocked access point. He later admitted the offense during questioning. Financial records demonstrated mounting debt related to medical bills incurred after Jordan's hospitalization earlier that year. The court imposed a sentence of 30 months, citing the planned nature of the offense but acknowledging the absence of prior felony convictions. He was designated for intake at Franklin Ridge Correctional Facility, a medium-security institution housing approximately 1,100 inmates. Correctional Officer Daniel Hargreave was 46 at the time Marcus arrived. He had worked at Franklin Ridge for 19 years and held the informal authority that accompanied seniority. Assigned primarily to inmate labor supervision, Hargreave oversaw the laundry operation, a unit responsible for cleaning institutional linens and uniforms. The position placed him in daily contact with rotating inmate crews in an area partially isolated from housing units. His personnel file contained no sustained disciplinary actions. Co-workers described him as strict but predictable. Supervisors noted consistent overtime hours and a willingness to cover understaffed shifts. Within the facility, internal affairs investigator Paula Keaton functioned as a secondary figure at intake. Her role was administrative, processing complaints, reviewing incident reports, and coordinating with external oversight when required. At the time Marcus entered custody, Keaton had been assigned to Franklin Ridge for 8 months following a transfer from a smaller rural facility. Her caseload was already backlogged due to staffing shortages. Marcus entered Franklin Ridge on January 14, 2020. The intake assessment classified him as low risk, suitable for work assignment within 60 days. His initial weeks passed without incident. He wrote weekly letters to Alana, called Jordan every Sunday evening, and accepted placement on the laundry detail when it became available in March. The assignment carried extra commissary credits and removed him from his housing unit for 8 hours a day. It was during those shifts that his regular contact with Officer Hargreave began. The laundry unit at Franklin Ridge operated 6 days a week on a fixed schedule. Inmates reported at 6:30, passed through tool control, and worked in segmented zones divided by function rather than supervision. The washers and dryers occupied the far end of the building, separated from the main corridor by 2 locked doors controlled by staff. Cameras existed, but coverage was uneven. Maintenance logs later showed repeated service requests for camera L7, positioned over the folding tables near the south wall, citing intermittent signal loss. Marcus Ellison's initial performance evaluations were unremarkable. He followed instructions, met output quotas, and avoided disciplinary write-ups. Officer Daniel Hargreave began assigning Marcus to closing tasks that required remaining after the rest of the crew cleared the floor. The justification recorded in daily logs referenced attention to detail and reliability. Those assignments placed Marcus alone with Hargreave for short intervals at the end of shifts. No policy prohibited this configuration. By late April 2020, Marcus's work schedule shifted further. He was reassigned from general folding to chemical inventory and linen counts, tasks that required entering the washer bay after standard hours. The change was documented as operational need. At the same time, Hargreave began conducting frequent pat-down searches of Marcus at the unit entrance, exceeding the average rate recorded for other inmates on the same crew. These searches were logged as routine. The first recorded deviation occurred on May 3rd. Marcus submitted a written request to housing staff asking to be moved to a different work detail, citing conflict with supervising officer. The request was denied the same day due to staffing constraints. No interview was conducted. The denial was logged as administrative. According to later statements Marcus made to a chaplain, Hargreave framed the escalating contact as protection. He referenced Marcus's low security classification and implied that favorable reports could accelerate eligibility for early release programs. Conversely, he noted that laundry infractions carried weight in custody reviews. The leverage was procedural rather than overt. Hargreave controlled daily write-ups, task assignments, and access to restricted spaces within the unit. By June, the contact escalated beyond work-related interactions. Incident reports show Marcus being directed to remain in the unit during meal release on 3 occasions, listed as inventory discrepancies. Other inmates corroborated that no discrepancies were observed. During this period, camera L7 recorded multiple signal interruptions lasting between 4 and 9 minutes. Maintenance tickets closed without corrective action. Marcus's communications with his family changed measurably. Phone records show a reduction in call duration and frequency beginning June 12. Letters sent to Alana during this period were shorter and avoided references to work. On June 21, Marcus requested an appointment with the facility counselor but canceled it the following morning. No reason was recorded. On July 2, an anonymous note was placed in the Internal Affairs Dropbox alleging improper conduct in laundry after hours. The note lacked names and specifics. Investigator Paula Keaton reviewed it on July 6 and categorized it as insufficient for action absent corroboration. No follow-up occurred. The pattern continued through July. Marcus remained on the laundry detail, continued receiving after-hours assignments, and accrued no formal disciplinary infractions. His custody status remained unchanged. On August 8, camera L7 failed completely for 17 minutes during the final shift of the day. The outage coincided with Marcus's documented presence in the washer bay and Hargreave's logged supervision. The footage was later deemed unrecoverable. 2 weeks later, a partial recording from the same camera captured an interaction between Marcus and Hargreave that violated departmental policy. The recording did not include audio and ended abruptly. It was sufficient to trigger mandatory reporting. The file was flagged by a systems technician during a routine review and forwarded internally. From that moment, the trajectory of events shifted from informal leverage to institutional response. The flagged footage was reviewed internally on August 24, 2020. It showed Marcus Ellison and Officer Daniel Hargreave inside the laundry washer bay during a documented camera outage window, with physical proximity inconsistent with authorized supervision. The clip lasted 31 seconds and terminated mid-sequence. Under departmental rules, the recording required referral to internal affairs and temporary removal of the officer from inmate-facing duties pending inquiry. That referral did not occur immediately. Instead, supervisory staff convened an internal compliance meeting the following morning. Meeting notes later obtained through civil discovery described the issue as potential policy exposure and documentation sensitivity. The focus centered on chain-of-command implications rather than the conduct itself. The recording was secured in an access-restricted folder. Hargreave remained on duty. Internal Affairs investigator Paula Keaton received the file on August 27. Her intake memorandum acknowledged probable misconduct and recommended an inmate interview to establish corroboration. That recommendation was approved conditionally. The condition required that Marcus provide a sworn statement supporting the footage. Without it, the inquiry would remain administrative rather than criminal. On August 29, Marcus was summoned to a private interview room adjacent to Housing Unit C. Present were Keaton and a facility administrator. The interview was not recorded. According to Keaton's later affidavit, Marcus was informed that the recording existed, that it implicated a staff member, and that his testimony was necessary to proceed. He was told that cooperation could result in protective custody placement and a favorable notation in his file. He was also advised that refusal would limit available options. Marcus requested time to consider. He was returned to housing and allowed one monitored phone call. Records show a 6-minute call to Alana Ellison that evening. No content was preserved, but Alana later testified that Marcus sounded restrained and asked questions about whether his name could become public if he spoke to investigators. The following morning, August 30th, Marcus provided his answer. He declined to testify. His stated reason, documented in Keaton's notes, was that formal participation would mark him inside the facility and potentially outside it. He expressed concern about retaliation against his family once details circulated. He did not deny the conduct shown in the recording. He refused to attach his name to it. The refusal altered the administrative posture immediately. Internal Affairs reclassified the inquiry as insufficient evidence. The footage remained archived but inactive. No external referral was made. That afternoon, Hargreave was notified of a temporary schedule change described as pending reassignment. He was instructed not to discuss the matter. At 16:20 the same day, Marcus received notice of a housing transfer. The form cited administrative reassignment due to bed space optimization. He was moved from Unit C to Unit F, a unit with a higher average security classification and limited staff familiarity with his history. The transfer bypassed the standard 72-hour notice window. No protective custody designation accompanied it. Guard logs from the evening shift show Marcus arriving at Unit F at 18:03. His intake checklist was incomplete. The assigned cell lacked a functioning intercom for the first 12 hours, a fact documented in maintenance records. Overnight rounds for Unit F between 2300 hours and 5 o'clock showed 2 unexplained gaps totaling 40 minutes. Both gaps occurred during periods when Officer Hargreave was logged elsewhere in the facility. At 7:12 on August 31st, an officer conducting morning count found Marcus unresponsive in his cell. Emergency protocols were initiated. He was pronounced dead within the hour. Initial incident summaries classified the death as self-inflicted. That classification was issued before autopsy, before forensic review, and before camera reconciliation. The machinery that had sought containment the day before now produced closure. The autopsy was conducted on September 1, 2020, by the county medical examiner under standard custodial death protocol. The initial external examination identified ligature marks inconsistent with the material listed in the incident report. Internal findings documented blunt force trauma to the torso and injuries occurring within a narrow premortem window. The final report concluded that the cause of death was homicide, citing evidence of an assault shortly before death. The ruling directly contradicted the facility's preliminary determination. By the time the conclusion was entered into the record, the physical environment had already changed. Marcus Ellison's cell had been cleaned within 12 hours of discovery. Bedding and clothing were disposed of as biohazard waste without full forensic cataloging. A routine sanitation order authorized the removal. The order carried a supervisor's signature but no timestamp. Surveillance review was initiated late. Camera coverage for Unit F during the overnight period showed multiple data gaps. The primary corridor camera failed to record between 0:41 and 1:19. A secondary angle covering the tier entrance showed only static frames for portions of the same interval. Technical staff attributed the failures to system latency. No raw backups were recovered. Server logs showed access to the footage archived by 2 administrator accounts during the morning following Marcus's death. Those accesses were not accompanied by incident numbers. Guard movement logs raised additional inconsistencies. Officer Daniel Hargreaves' activity sheet placed him on perimeter duty during the relevant overnight hours. However, radio check-ins recorded his voice responding to an interior unit call at 0:58. That discrepancy was noted but not escalated. Hargreaves was placed on paid administrative leave 3 days later without a stated reason and reassigned to a non-inmate-facing role the following month. Internal Affairs reopened its inquiry under external pressure after the autopsy ruling became public record. Investigator Paula Keaton conducted follow-up interviews with staff assigned to Unit F. Statements varied on the number of rounds conducted and the timing of cell checks. None admitted direct contact with Marcus after his transfer. No inmates from Unit F were formally interviewed. Requests to review use of force logs returned negative results. On September 10, the facility issued a revised statement acknowledging the homicide ruling while maintaining that no evidence currently links staff actions to the death. The statement referenced the absence of inmate testimony and incomplete video data. The earlier laundry footage remained sealed, classified as personnel material. No charges were filed. The case stalled at the evidentiary threshold. The moment that foreclosed alternative outcomes occurred not at the autopsy table but earlier, at the point of refusal. When Marcus declined to testify, the institution's risk calculus shifted. Protection mechanisms were not activated. Administrative processes replaced investigative ones. Transfers were executed without safeguards. Documentation gaps multiplied. Each procedural choice reduced traceability. By the time the death was discovered, the available evidence had already been degraded. The record now reflected a closed loop, a dead inmate, missing footage, conflicting logs, and an officer quietly removed from exposure without accountability. The system advanced toward resolution by attrition rather than adjudication. The next phase would unfold outside the prison walls, where the constraints of custody no longer controlled access to records or silence. The homicide ruling triggered a mandatory notification to the State Corrections Oversight Office. That notification, dated September 3, 2020, initiated a parallel review separate from Franklin Ridge's internal processes. Unlike Internal Affairs, the Oversight Office possessed subpoena authority and access to records beyond facility discretion. The scope was limited to procedural compliance, not criminal culpability. Investigators began by reconstructing the 48 hours following Marcus Ellison's refusal to testify. Transfer orders, housing assignments, maintenance requests, and staff rosters were pulled into a unified timeline. The first discrepancy appeared in the transfer authorization. Policy required supervisory justification and a custody risk assessment for same-day unit moves. Marcus's file contained neither. The authorizing signature belonged to an acting lieutenant whose shift ended before the order was entered into the system. Phone metadata from the Oversight Office confirmed that Officer Daniel Hargreaves placed 2 internal calls to administrative extensions within 30 minutes of Marcus's refusal interview. The call durations were logged, but no call content was recorded. The recipients were senior staff involved in compliance oversight. When questioned, both denied discussing the inmate or the investigation. Investigators next examined Unit F's overnight operations. The guard assigned to primary rounds reported completing checks at 15-minute intervals. However, electronic key logs showed no cell door scans for Marcus's tier during a 28-minute span. The guard attributed this to a handheld scanner malfunction. Maintenance records confirmed a scanner battery replacement later that morning but did not establish failure at the relevant time. Medical response documentation also diverged. The first responder logged arrival at Marcus's cell at 7:18. Body camera footage from that responder showed arrival at 7:24. No explanation was provided for the discrepancy. The footage did not capture the cell interior prior to medical intervention. The responder's camera activated automatically only after entry. The Oversight Office requested access to the archived laundry footage that initiated the Internal Affairs inquiry. The request was delayed for 12 days. When provided, the file metadata indicated it had been accessed and copied twice after Marcus's death. The copies were not located. No policy violation was cited. On October 19, the Oversight Office issued preliminary findings. The report concluded that procedural failures occurred in transfer authorization, camera maintenance response, and evidence preservation. It stated that these failures materially impaired the ability to determine responsibility. The report did not assign individual blame. It recommended policy revisions and additional training. Simultaneously, the county prosecutor reviewed the homicide determination for potential charges. Without eyewitness testimony, intact forensic evidence, or complete video coverage, the prosecutor declined to proceed. The declination letter cited insufficient probability of conviction. Officer Hargreave was not named. Marcus Ellison's death certificate listed homicide as manner of death. No suspect was identified. The criminal case closed without arrest. The administrative review concluded with corrective action memos and no terminations. By November, the system had reached its endpoint, acknowledgement without consequence. What remained unresolved moved into the civil arena, where standards differed and silence carried less weight. The civil action was filed on February 4, 2021, in federal district court by Alana Ellison, acting on behalf of herself and her son. The complaint named the State Department of Corrections, Franklin Ridge Correctional Facility, and several unnamed employees. The causes of action were framed narrowly: failure to protect, deliberate indifference, and destruction of evidence. The filing did not allege a single perpetrator. It alleged the system. Discovery compelled the release of records that had not been provided during internal review. These included email chains referencing the laundry footage as high-risk material, server access logs showing manual overrides during the night of Marcus's death, and staffing communications discussing reassignment timing before the transfer order was finalized. None of the documents established direct causation. Collectively, they demonstrated coordination. Depositions were conducted over 6 months. Officer Daniel Hargreave invoked his Fifth Amendment rights in response to all substantive questions. Other staff testified to policy adherence and memory gaps. Investigator Paula Keaton acknowledged that she had not escalated the initial footage externally and stated that she followed supervisory direction. No perjury findings were made. The department moved to dismiss criminally relevant claims, arguing sovereign immunity and lack of proximate cause. The court denied dismissal on procedural grounds, allowing the case to proceed to settlement mediation. In September 2022, the parties reached a confidential settlement. The terms included a monetary payment to the Ellison family and a non-admission clause. No employee discipline was required as part of the agreement. Parallel to the settlement, Franklin Ridge issued revised policies on inmate transfers during active inquiries and mandated external reporting for custodial death evidence preservation. Camera maintenance protocols were updated. Oversight staffing levels remained unchanged. Officer Hargreave retired the following year with full benefits. No criminal charges were ever filed. Alana Ellison learned the full sequence of events through deposition transcripts and document disclosures, nearly 18 months after Marcus's death. Her son received the explanation years later, framed as institutional failure rather than individual violence. The official record closed with acknowledgments, amendments, and payouts. The underlying question of responsibility remained unanswered. Marcus Ellison entered custody alive, serving a finite sentence for a documented offense. He exited in a casket after refusing to supply what the institution required to protect itself. The process that followed did not identify who killed him. It demonstrated how procedural decisions, taken in sequence, made that outcome irreversible.